Hello everyone and welcome to Grow Big Red. Today on the program what we're going to do is talk a little bit about all of this leaf debris and all of the stuff that falls off of trees and shrubs and flowers and other landscape plants. And I might try for a bit of a paradigm shift. If you think back to, I don't know, the late 80s, a guy named Joel Barker talked about the concept of a paradigm shift. And in a nutshell, it talked about the perception of something changing into the perception of something else, usually supported by facts. And the classic example is things made by the country of Japan. They used to be thought of as low quality, mass produced, and that was usually cars. And then quickly, and over the period of about 10 years, I guess, gradually, kind of in between, we ended up seeing those products change. And Toyota, Camry, Lexus, Nissan, all of these companies doubled down, spent a lot of money on research and development, and started producing very high quality, very durable, long-lasting products that people really gravitated towards, and then really started taking market share away from General Motors and Ford and Chrysler. And the same thing is true here. And that's maybe what I'm trying to do is get a paradigm shift. And all of this stuff that comes off of your landscape in terms of unwanted parts or plant parts that are no longer part of the plant when Mother Nature rolls in with a heavy freeze, those really should be thought of as an asset, as a beneficial thing for the overall landscape. Now, of course, we all think about them in terms of, something to pick up and throw away. But really, it should be considered something that could be recycled and used again to bolster the production of the landscape rather than just something to be discarded. And that's what landscape waste is. The leaves that fall off of trees, the fruits that fall off trees, like these Osage orange fruits that fall off trees, twigs, stems, all kinds of leaves and other debris that fall down. This is all something that can eventually decompose, especially if you do it right, and then turn into compost. And then that compost can be used to enrich and bolster the growth of vegetable gardens, flower beds, ground covers, any of those types of horticultural entities that we need to grow better, and especially in newer parts of town. I tell you, in some of the older parts of town, and anywhere that's maybe 30, 40 years old or older, they have some of the best soils, and we rarely see problems of plants growing in those areas. The ones we see the most problems with are the newer parts of town, the areas where the soil has been very recently disturbed. And that ruins all the soil structure, makes the soil very clay-like. We take off all the good organic matter, and all we're left with is subsoil and clay. And so we need to recreate that in the landscape, especially if you're in a newer part of town, maybe less than 20 years old or so. Now you can do that by adding compost, or you can make it yourself, and the stuff you need to make it yourself with is staring right in front of you. So all it needs is a little bit of processing. So all of this leaf debris should be thought of as an asset. As well as containing organic matter, it also contains nutrients. So you could be thinking of this stuff as fertilizer, because it really is. It's one of those things that we ordinarily don't see because it's not in a bag of fertilizer that says 1856 on it. But all of this material recycles nutrients and organic matter back to the landscape itself. So think of it that way. Secondly, we need to pick it up and process it. We need to compost it. Now, we can do that a couple of ways. First of all, mowing it is a great way to pick all this material up. As long as we don't get more than, a couple, 3 inches, this can be easily picked up with a lawn mower with a bagger attachment. And what that'll do is first go ahead and start chewing it up, especially if you have one of the Ninja kind of blades, the recycler blades that does a great job of picking that material up, chewing it up into small pieces. And then it can be put into the compost pile itself. And that works out really well. Of course, you can always just rake this material up and put it into a tote bag and carry it to the compost pile. That's another procedure, another thing that can be done. Or you can also just clip these materials off. For example, these are all leaf debris materials that have fallen off of various trees and fallen to the ground. Here's a sumac leaf. Some of these are mulberries, some of these are from the Osage orange, they kind of go together. Just all different kinds of plant material that drop leaves. We've got some silver maple in here, we've got some sumac, just lots of different plants that fall to the ground. So that can be picked up with the lawnmower. And then plants like these, now this was a Solomon seal, or leaves of a Solomon seal. These are perennials for shade. They grow really well in the shade. Here's some hosta leaves. That's another shade plant. So these I got from a shade garden. And all of these should be thought of not as something that is a landscape waste piece, but an asset in the landscape and something that can be composted, processed a bit, and recycled. So at this time of the year, it's good to actually collect those and cut those off of stems, off the crown, picked up and put into the compost pile so that it's able to be removed from the plant itself and then processed accordingly. So that's what you need to do. Pick it up by mowing, pick it up by clipping, chop that up a little bit, and then eventually move it over to the compost pile. Let's talk about that a little bit. This is sort of a pretend or a demonstration compost bin. Now normally you'd have a bin probably about 5 times this size or maybe 6 times this size. You can make it out of a lot of different kinds of materials. What we've used here are just some old 1x1 pieces of wood, and some hardware cloth or some netting. You can use concrete blocks if you got a lot of those laying around. I've seen people who change their patio from a brick patio to a wood patio or some other sort of stamped concrete or something like that. Suddenly you got a whole bunch of bricks left over. What am I going to do with all these bricks? The thing you're going to do with them is make a compost pile. You can use snow fencing. There's just a whole variety of anything that you can use to hold up and reshape the material. This material here can be used, and fashioned into a compost unit. Now, you might be thinking, well, why do we have 2 or 3 or 4 of these? It's because you're going to take this material here in its raw form and then place it into the first pile, or the first compartment, if you will, and then let it sit there for a little while. A month or so later, you'll come back, or even a week or so later, you'll come back with a compost pitchfork, something like this with the big wide tines on it, so it's easy to lift that material up and dump. So sort of a scoop and dump kind of a technique. And these work really well. They're just about the right size, they're easy on the back, they're pretty ergonomically correct. You just pick them up and drop them, and that works out pretty well. The more often you do that, the quicker it's going to turn into compost. So you do that. Now ideally you might have 3 or 4 of these side by side, but just for ease of demonstration we just have 2. So you might want to add another one and another one. But this is the end product. As you can see, you move it from one to the other. This is the end product. This is what we call black gold. And you can see where it still has a few leftover uncomposted plant parts in here. But for the most part, this is just ideal to have put into a vegetable garden or into a flower bed. That's what really will help plant roots get off to a good start and provide some nutrients, provide some organic matter, provide some humates, which are all important for getting good growth of your plant material itself. So turning it often. The other thing about it is it works well. You can notice that after a while this dries out. At first, and when it's kind of dewy a little bit, it is pretty dry. But then when you put it in here together, sometimes it can get a little bit stagnant, if you will. So in addition to the turning, it's always a good idea to also do a little bit of watering, a little bit of misting from time to time. Now it's easier to do that in the summertime, springtime, summertime, when you have the hoses hooked up to your house. But it could be as simple as getting a 5-gallon bucket of water from the basement and filling it up and wetting down the raw material, because you need a little bit of temperature in order to make that happen, along with water and along with air. That's the reason for turning it. You need to bring air into this compost mix, otherwise it just turns sort of anaerobic and stagnant, and it's not going to happen. So if you turn it weekly or monthly, you can probably produce compost in about 6 months. If you do it, not very often, maybe seasonally, it'd take about a year. I've been involved with projects where it's very aggressive turning of the compost and putting air into it, but it could turn compost in about 3 weeks. So it can be done. And again, like I said, there's just nothing better. It's truly black gold, truly the kind of thing that we just need, especially in those new landscapes, to help us revitalize them, get those clay soils busted up, and get the plants off to a good start. All right, so that's how we turn what you would call a waste product into a very desirable product, and that's a big important lesson for this fall. Again, it involves a paradigm shift, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to do, but it's important if you get it done. I'm John Fesch with Nebraska Extension, and inviting you to give us a call. One of the Master Gardeners would be happy to assist you. Our phone number, 444-7804.